with the beginnings of Curious.
It was not a Disney movie in terms of like, let's start a theater company and all of a sudden we were curious.
Chip was hired by a different theater company in town to do Angels in America, both parts.
We found a group of artists that really enjoyed working together, that seemed to have a nice collaborative, shared spirit, and we wanted to create a body of work together.
The play was great. It was really outstanding. Or we thought it was, or maybe even more importantly, the experience of making the play was really outstanding.
I remember at the time they paid a $35 stipend, I believe, for each, for every artist that worked on every show. I do say that we all sort of looked at each other and we just were like, man, you know, like we've got to be able to find a way to pay artists a little bit more than that.
So we decided we should do more of this, and we should do it together. We then instantly pretty much became a theater company.
I remember when we did How I Learned to Drive in '99. It was the first new equity contract in like, I don't remember whether it was 10 or 20 years, but it was a really long time in this community that an equity contract had been offered.
Was there a formal definition of what it meant to be a company member?
I don't think there was a formal definition in the early years because we were just the people that were around that got things done.
We've always sort of joked offline that company membership is doing cool shit with cool people.
We cleaned the toilets, we painted the floors, we did the box office, we created the posters, I mean all of that. But we were also the people that created the art together, directing and designing the shows, and in some cases acting in the shows. The truth of the matter is, for many years, the company really functioned as sort of volunteer staff. I think there was a real sense of ownership that had a breadth, or a scope is maybe a better word. I'm not sure it can exist past a certain point of growth. When you sit around a table with 5 or 6 or 7 people, there's no way that quality of conversation can be the same when you sit around a table with 20 people. It changes the dynamic of the conversation.
I think the collaborative genesis started from the design side.
And you were there as an actor?
I don't know what I was there as. That's the whole thing is, we keep saying it started as a company of designers and I'm an actor. But I also am, and I think this was the caveat, the education director.
In the early years, the only 2 actors in the company were Dee and Todd. There were no other actors, and everybody else were either technicians or designers. And we embraced it, and it was unique. And I think that people, both locally and nationally, took notice in a way that they wouldn't have or might not have taken notice had we just been another acting company. We were starting to gain some momentum. We were starting to grow a little bit. The amount of work was growing. The amount of artists paying attention to what we were doing was increasing. I think on the one hand, there was more that we needed in terms of support, and increasing the company offered that, and we also were growing in terms of artistic opportunities.
Have you guys always had a resident company model?
It was founded, so we call them associate artists. From the beginning, there was, Steve very much started the company with a group of people. Always with the idea that, he was the artistic director, just with that kind of clarity. There were designers on board, directors, composers, artists, actors, all, and playwrights, all kind of involved.
I have always wanted to test out the notion of actual repertory. Because we're Trinity Repertory Company, but we don't really do the middle part of our name.
The company was founded by a group of artists, mostly actors, but also included some directors and a playwright or 2. And the model as a collective meant that everybody did everything. There was no artistic director, so the collective made the decisions about the season. This worked for a number of years. I would say 3 or 4 years. It worked really well.
The real goal from the beginning was to create in an extraordinarily collaborative way. I think there was an understanding of we really like working in this way. We are good at working in this way, which for the way that we develop shows is important.
There also reached a point where they felt, those founders felt that they needed someone to actually be the final arbitrator and make decisions around artistic choices.
I think the company evolved exactly as it was supposed to. The company was never intended to be an ensemble. But at the same time, we are associate artists are the definition of who we are and how we have evolved in our success, I should say. We want to be a mission-driven company that supports a lot of artists doing this kind of work, but at the same time, when a reviewer writes about us as this great ensemble that created this great piece, we're like, great! When we get a really good review that's very much the civilians and the way that civilians, this great ensemble creates work, we're sort of like, well, we're not going
I can argue with
to
that.
argue with that. So we do play both sides against it.
We've spent the last several seasons letting people know that the work that we do is good. And so now I think we can take a few risks.
Actors are so much a part of what we do in the theater. We needed to find a way to bring them into the company in a bigger way. John and I really tossed this idea around about a resident company of actors that would have more of a voice in the company.
I wish that I had a little bit more ethnic diversity in the company. That's the one thing that I wish for the company.
I mean, what's interesting is that you guys have always been self-reflective about this question. And I think we have often not been, in the sense that we've just sort of had a group and we've continued to add to that and use them and not use them. And the problems have arisen, but we haven't always been as, I think, constantly analyzing it.
I'd say as you go forward on this, which is interesting because you already have this semi-company, but now you're honing in to possibly a smaller company, a finite model. I think the two most important things would be clarity and communication.
What do you think your company would look like if you didn't have your associate artists?
Oh God, I don't think we'd do anything. It'd be awful. If we don't do company-driven work, I think we would ultimately end up looking a little bit like a play development company, and that's not what we want to be.
If you were starting from scratch, what would you build?
I would love to have, a staff of actors that are actually paid a living wage to be part of our company year-round. If I could do anything differently, it would have been to raise enough money so that we could start with that.
I would want people who are principally actors who also direct and write. I would want there to be an education program. I'd want it to have the training component, a conservatory or an MFA program or something like that. And I'd want it to be really deeply based in its community. So,
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to continue to grow?
Well, it's a tough question because I don't think you can stop growing. I think it's important to bring new audiences into your work, but at the same time, part of our mission is to be an intimate theater.
Do you think there's a trend in toward artist marginalization within producing organizations? And if you do, then what do you think are some of the obstacles that face our field?